The instruction was given the way it always was. Not to her face, but about her, the way you'd mention a draft coming in under a door. "Keep her in the back tonight," Etienne Roux said, not lowering his voice. "We have cameras rolling. We have guests who matter. The last thing the brand needs is the audience seeing a flick of his wrist that took in the whole of her at once. That." Nella Brandt went on chopping. She did not look up, and she did not slow down. The knife kept its rhythm against the board, even and unhurried, the way it had for 19 years. She was a large woman, and had been long enough that the word in his mouth had stopped landing like a wound and become something closer to weather. A thing she walked through on the way to the actual work. "Of course, chef," she said. And that was all. It was the calm that bothered him. He waited a beat for the flush, the flinch, the small apology people offered when you made them feel small. None came. She slid the chopped shallots into the pot, wiped the board, reached for the next thing. He turned away first. Tonight, Casa Verita was not a kitchen. It was a stage. For 30 years, the Moretti family's private house had quietly served the best food in the city to people who never appeared on a guest list. Now there were lighting rigs in the courtyard and a camera crew threading cables across the marble because the family had decided the world should finally see it. A launch. A brand. And to front that brand, Roux had brought in 5 guest chefs. Beautiful, branded, each with a following and a knife roll that had never seen a real lunch rush. 5 ambassadors in pressed whites, plating things that photographed like jewelry. Foam. Tweezers. A single scallop on a plate the size of a hubcap. Nella had been told where to stand for all of it, at the far steel table, behind the walk-in, where the cameras didn't reach. She had cooked at Casa Verita since she was 18. She knew which burner ran hot, which exhaust fan rattled at a certain speed, how the old stockpot sang just before it was ready. The 5 ambassadors did not know any of that. They didn't need to. They were the face. She was the hands no one was meant to see. And there was one more thing happening tonight that the cameras were not told about. At the long table in the main room sat Luca Moretti, late 40s, silver threading through dark hair, a short beard, the stillness of a man who had learned long ago that the person who speaks least controls the room. Across from him sat Don Raphael Bianchi, and the 2 families had not shared a table in a very long time. This dinner was the truce. The food was not decoration tonight. It was the language 2 old enemies had agreed to speak instead of the other one. So when the first ambassador's course went out, the scallop, the foam, the artful smear, every person who understood what the night actually was held their breath. Luca lifted his fork. He tasted it. He set the fork down. He said nothing, which was worse than anything he could have said. The second course came. The third. Each one prettier than the last, and each one met with the same quiet, the same fork laid gently to rest. Roux hovered at the edge of the room, his smile getting tighter with every plate, because he had built his entire pitch on this dinner, and the most important man in the room was eating like a man being served air. Then, somewhere past the 4th course, Luca paused. He turned his head slightly, the way a man does when he hears his own name in a crowd. The cameras didn't catch it. The ambassadors didn't notice it. But under the perfume of truffle oil and the heat of the lamps, something else had reached the table. Low and warm and unhurried, the smell of a thing that had been cooking for hours and had nothing to prove. It came from the back, from the steel table behind the walk-in. From the pot, Nella kept going every service for the crew to eat after the guests were gone. Her grandmother's soup, the one she made out of habit and scraps and care, because somebody had to feed the people who fed everyone else. Luca stood up. The room reorganized itself around the motion the way a room does when a certain kind of man stands. A waiter froze mid-pour. Roux started forward with a host's smile already loading. "Signor Moretti, the next course is just." Luca walked past him. He walked past the cameras, past the 5 ambassadors in their spotless whites, past the plates that had been built to be photographed. He went around the walk-in, into the part of the kitchen the lighting crew had been told not to bother with, and he stopped at the steel table where a large woman in a stained apron was ladling soup into a chipped bowl for a dishwasher who hadn't eaten since noon. "May I?" Luca said. Nella looked at him. Then she handed him the bowl she'd just filled. The dishwasher could wait, and she watched a man who owned half the city eat standing up with a borrowed spoon in the one corner of his own house where no one had thought to point a light. He finished it. He set the empty bowl down on the steel. Behind him, through the doorway, the camera crew and the 5 ambassadors and Don Rafael Bianchi himself were all waiting at a table full of beautiful, untouched food. Luca didn't turn around to any of it. He looked at the only person in the building who had not spent the evening trying to be seen. "Send the others home," he said to Rue, without raising his voice. "All 5. Tonight." Then, to her, "Who taught you to make this?" She didn't answer the question. Not really. "My grandmother," Nella said, taking the empty bowl back from him and setting it in the wash bin, because a bowl left sitting was a bowl someone else had to carry. "It's just soup, Signor Moretti. Nothing for the cameras." Luca looked at her for a moment longer than the answer needed. Then he nodded once, the way a man does when he files something away to open later, and he let her go back to work. But he didn't leave the kitchen. He pulled out a stool at the end of the steel table, sat where he could see the whole room, and stayed, which the crew found unnerving, and which Nella simply worked around, the way she worked around everything. She had been working around things at Casa Verita for 19 years. She had come in at 18 to wash dishes and stayed because she could taste what a dish was missing before the head chef could. That was her gift, plain and unglamorous. She could put a spoon to anything and know what it needed and how long it had left. Over the years, the kitchen had quietly reorganized itself around that gift. When a sauce broke at the worst possible moment, it was Nella who fixed it. When a supplier sent fish a day past its best, it was Nella who caught it at the loading door before it ever reached a plate. The reputation that brought powerful men to this house for 30 years had been built, course by course, by a woman the house had decided should stand in the back. Why did she tolerate it? People always wanted that answer fast, and the fast answer was wrong. She tolerated it because the kitchen was hers in the only way that mattered. She knew it down to the rattle of its fans, and because a woman who looked like her had learned young that the world handed you the work and gave the credit to someone better lit. She had stopped expecting the credit a long time ago. She had not stopped doing the work. Those were 2 different surrenders, and she had only made the first one. The credit, lately, had a name. Etienne Roux had arrived 18 months ago, hired to be the face of a kitchen that had never needed a face. He was good on camera and competent at the stove, in that order. The dishes that the magazines photographed under his name were, often enough, dishes Nella had built and handed up the line while he was being interviewed in the courtyard. He knew it. She knew it. It had become a quiet arrangement that wasn't an arrangement at all. Just the old machine running the way it always ran, with a brighter ornament bolted to the front. Tonight's launch, the cameras, the 5 ambassadors, that was Roux turning the kitchen into a stage with himself at center. And the only thing standing between him and a television deal was that the most important diner in the building had just walked past his beautiful food to eat hers. He was, right now, on the far side of the courtyard, fixing it. He was talking to a woman in a charcoal suit who had been watching the whole evening from a place where she, too, could see everything and be seen by no one. Gloria Sorrentino did not cook. Gloria handled the numbers, the suppliers, the invoices, the side of the family's business that had to stay clean enough to photograph. She had been with the Morettis for 12 years, and Luca trusted her the way you trust the floor you've walked on your whole life, without thinking about it. If Roux was the face, Gloria was the plumbing, and the difference between them was that everyone could see the face. Nella had noticed something about the plumbing 3 weeks ago and had said nothing. The cream had changed, not the brand on the label, the cream itself. A degree thicker, a shade off in the way it broke under heat, the kind of thing only a tongue that had tasted 10,000 sauces would clock. The invoices still said the same dairy they'd used for years. The product in the walk-in did not taste like that dairy. She had mentioned it once, to the Sues, and the Sues had shrugged and said the paperwork was fine, take it up with Sorrentino. So she hadn't. A kitchen maid does not take a question about the books to the woman who keeps them. She had simply adjusted, cooked around the new cream the way she cooked around everything, and filed the strangeness away in the same place Luca had just filed her grandmother's soup. Across the courtyard, Gloria said something, and Rue's shoulders came down from his ears. Whatever she'd told him, it had calmed him. He glanced back toward the kitchen, toward the boss sitting on a stool watching a maid work, and the look on his face was no longer panic. It was the look of a man who had been handed a plan. Luca saw it too. He saw most things. But what he was thinking about, on the stool at the end of the steel table, was not Rue at all. He was thinking that he had tasted that soup before, not a soup like it. That soup. The specific weight of it. The exact place where the sweetness turned and went savory. A thing he could not have described to anyone and could not, now, stop describing to himself. He had eaten it a very long time ago, in a year he did not talk about, from the hands of someone whose face he could no longer hold steady in his memory. He had spent 30 years and a great deal of money making sure he would never again be the kind of hungry he had been then. And a woman in a stained apron had just put it back in front of him as if it were nothing, as if it were Tuesday. He was not a man who believed in coincidence. He had survived by not believing in it. Sorrentino, he said, when Gloria came in from the courtyard. He did not get up. The launch is off. Just the dinner now. The real one. Send everyone with a camera home. A pause. And pull the supplier records for the last 3 months. Bring them to me tonight. For half a second, so brief that only a person who watched faces for a living would have caught it. Gloria Sorrentino went very still. Then she smiled and said, "Of course, Luca." At the steel table, ladle in hand, Nella caught it too. The supplier records came to the kitchen instead of the office. That was the first thing that told Nella the night had changed shape. Gloria brought them herself, a slim folder, 3 months of invoices, and set it on the steel table near where Luca still sat. She did it smoothly, with a word about the figures all being in order, and she did not look at Nella once, which was its own kind of looking. Then Luca did the thing that rearranged the room a second time. "Brandt," he said, "you've worked the loading door for 19 years. You know what comes through it." He slid the folder a few inches toward her. "Tell me if the paper matches the food." For a moment, the kitchen held very still. A maid did not read the books. Gloria's hand came to rest flat on the table. Not a slam, just a settling, the way you'd steady something you didn't want to move. "Luca, with respect, Nella isn't." "I didn't ask what she isn't," Luca said, mildly, and that was the end of it. Nella wiped her hands. She did not reach for the folder right away. She walked to the walk-in first, came back with a small dish of the cream, set it beside the invoices, and tasted it. One clean spoon, the way she'd tasted 10,000 things. Then she opened the folder and read. It took her 4 minutes. She read the way she cooked, without hurry and without missing anything, and when she looked up, her face had not changed at all, which was the most alarming thing about it. "The paper says Valenti Dairy," she said. "Same as always. Same price. Near enough." She set the spoon down beside the relevant page. "This isn't Valenti. Valenti breaks clean under heat. This curdles a half-second early and leaves a film. Somebody's buying cheaper cream and invoicing it as Valenti's. The difference between what's paid and what's bought doesn't show up on a plate." A pause. "It shows up somewhere." The kitchen was quiet. Gloria's hand was still flat on the table. "How long?" Luca said. 3 weeks that I'm sure of. Maybe longer." Nella closed the folder. "I mentioned it once. I was told the paperwork was fine and to take it up with Signora Sorrentino. She let that sit exactly as long as it needed to and not a second more. So I cooked around it. That's what the back of the kitchen is for." And it was in saying it out loud. Cooked around it. That's what the back is for. That something turned over in her, quietly, the way a stock turns the moment before it's ready. Because she had always told herself the same comfortable story, that she stood in the back by accident, by temperament, by the slow drift of a kitchen finding its own shape. But a tongue that could catch a half-second of curdle does not get hidden by accident. The supplier she'd flagged ran through the one person who had a reason to keep her quiet. The credit she'd lost ran to a man hired to keep the cameras on the front of the house and the eyes off the loading door. For 3 weeks, she had read it as bad luck and bad manners. Sitting at the steel table with the invoices under her hand, she read it again, and this time it spelled something else. She had not been overlooked. She had been placed. In the one corner of the building where the person most likely to notice the theft was least likely to be believed about it. Her invisibility wasn't the kitchen's habit. It was someone's design, and the realization didn't break over her like grief. It settled, cool and clarifying, like the moment a source finally comes together and you understand it was always going to. Signor Moretti. She turned the folder so it faced him again. You can have my answer to your question, but I'd like to say one thing first, and I'd like to say it plainly. Luca inclined his head. You're going to want to fix this fast. You have a dinner in the other room you cannot afford to ruin, and the fastest fix is to put a name to the cream and make it disappear before the dessert course. She didn't raise her voice. She rarely did. Don't. If you cut off the hand that's stealing, you'll lose the arm it's attached to, and the arm is the part that matters. Let me cook the rest of tonight's dinner. The real food for the real table. And let me keep tasting. Whoever changed that cream changed it through a system, and a system leaves a trail in the kitchen before it ever reaches the books. I can read that trail. No one out front can. And in return? Luca said. In return, I stop standing in the back. She said it the way you'd state the price of bread. No heat, no plea. Not for a camera. I'm not interested in being a face. But the food that's served at this table tonight goes out as mine, and the next time someone hands a question about my kitchen to Sorrentino, it comes to me first. That's not a promotion. It's a correction. Across the table, Gloria Sorrentino lifted her hand off the steel at last and smiled the smile of someone who had just been handed a much harder evening than she'd planned for. Luca looked at Nella for a long moment. Then he stood, picked up the folder, and held it out to her. Not back to Gloria. To her. Cook, he said. I'll taste everything. For the next 2 hours, Casa Verita ran the way it had been built to run, with the right person at the center of it. Nella cooked the truce dinner. The real one. The one that had nothing to do with cameras. She moved through the kitchen the way a conductor moves through an orchestra she has known for 19 years, and the 5 ambassadors' stations, now empty, became hers. The Sioux fell in behind her without being asked. Even Rue, sent down from the courtyard with nowhere left to perform, found himself plating to her instructions and hating every second of it. Luca tasted everything, as promised. He stood at the pass and took a spoon to each dish before it went out to Don Bianchi's table, and dish by dish the quiet at that table changed its character. The forks stopped being laid down. Somewhere around the 3rd real course, Raphael Bianchi sent word back to the kitchen asking who was cooking. Luca didn't answer it out loud. He just looked at Nella, and the look was the answer. It was, she would think later, the closest thing to courtship a kitchen could hold. Not words. Work. He passed her the things she reached for half a second before she reached. She read the dishes he doubted off his face and fixed them before he said anything. 2 people who had spent their lives being careful found, in the narrow space between the stove and the pass, that they did not have to be careful with each other. He asked her once, low, where she'd learned to read a supplier through a source, and she told him about the loading door, the years of it, and he listened the way men who own things rarely listen. As if the information were worth more than the person was supposed to be. Near midnight, when the dinner was won and the kitchen had gone briefly still, he said the thing she'd been waiting for him to say. I can end this tonight. He said it quietly, just to her, the folder of invoices on the steel between them. Sorrentino. Rue. The supplier. I have the records. I have your word on the cream. And I have ways of making people answer questions. By morning your kitchen is yours. Your name is on the door, and the people who buried you are gone. You wouldn't have to lift another finger. He paused. Let me fix it. It was, she understood, the kindest offer a man like him knew how to make. It was also the wrong one, and she did not have to think about why. No, Nella said. She set down the towel she'd been holding and turned to face him fully, because this was worth her whole attention. If you make them disappear tonight, you fix what I can see. You don't fix what I can't. She tapped the folder. The cream is the part that reaches the kitchen. It's the smallest part. Somebody changed a supplier across a system that's supposed to be watched, and they did it for long enough and clean enough that no one upstairs blinked. That isn't one greedy hand. That's somebody who knows exactly how your house counts its money. Somebody you'd never think to count. If you cut off what I caught, the rest of it heals over and keeps bleeding you somewhere you'll never look. I don't want the kitchen handed to me with the wound still inside it. So what do you want? I want to keep tasting. Simple, flat, certain. Give me until the books close at the end of the week. I'll find where the money the cream stole actually went, because it went through the kitchen on its way somewhere, and the kitchen is the one room in this house I can read better than the person hiding it can. Then you won't be removing a hand on my word. You'll be removing the whole thing on proof anyone can see. She held his gaze. I've been the unverified word in the back for 19 years, Signor Moretti. I'm not going to win this by being it one more time. Luca was quiet for a while. Then, slowly, he closed the folder and slid it back to her side of the steel, leaving it with her again. The week, he said. Taste. And there was something in his face when he said it. Something she hadn't earned from a powerful man before and didn't entirely know what to do with. Not gratitude, not appetite. Respect, with the door behind it left open. Across the kitchen, Rue watched the two of them at the pass. The boss and the maid, heads bent over a folder he wasn't allowed to touch, and he understood that his television deal had died sometime in the last 2 hours and no one had bothered to tell him. He found Gloria in the office at midnight. She has the books, he said. Moretti gave her the books, Gloria. She read the cream in 4 minutes. She's going to keep reading. By Friday, she walks straight into. I know what's by Friday. Gloria did not look up from the screen. Her voice was very calm, calmer than his, and that was what finally frightened him. Sit down, Etienne. You've spent 18 months taking the credit for that woman's cooking. Now she's going to take something of yours. The blame for every crate you ever carried out the back door. Let her have it. Let her find your little book and feel clever. A loud thief, caught, is a closed case. Rue sat down slowly. And then? Gloria turned the screen toward him. On it was the menu for Friday. The closing dinner, the formal seal of the truce, both families at one table, the meal that would either end 30 years of blood or start them again. And then, on Friday, the most important dinner this family will ever serve goes wrong at the table, Gloria said, in front of both families, in front of everyone. And every record in this house points to the woman who insisted on cooking it. She smiled. You'll be long gone by then, Etienne. You're the thief they catch early. She's the one they bury. The trail showed itself on Thursday, the way these things do. Not all at once, but in the moment Nella stopped looking for theft and started looking for waste. She had spent 3 days tasting backward through the kitchen, and the cream was only the start of it. Once she knew what a swapped supplier tasted like, she found others. The olive oil cut with something cheaper, the saffron that was mostly turmeric and confidence, a veal that had never been within 100 miles of the farm on the invoice. Every one of them billed at the premium price, bought at the cheap one, the difference vanishing into the gap between what the paper said and what the tongue knew. She mapped it on the back of a prep sheet, supplier by supplier, and the map pointed at a number that was far too large to be one man skimming for a television career. And then, Thursday afternoon, the kitchen handed her Rue. It handed him to her the way it handed her everything. Quietly, in a detail nobody else would weigh. She found the second set of invoices in the dry store, taped under the shelf where the saffron was kept, in Rue's hand. A private ledger of what he'd personally pocketed. Skimmed deliveries sold out the back door. Cash taken to inflate his own numbers for the brand deal. 18 months of a celebrity chef quietly robbing the house that paid him, written down in his own careful script because men like Rue could never quite resist admiring their own cleverness on paper. She brought it to Luca that evening. She laid the prep sheet map beside Rue's hidden ledger on the steel, and she watched a powerful man read proof of a betrayal he'd half expected. There it is, Luca said. There was a stillness coming off him that the kitchen had learned, by now, to respect. Rue. The swapped suppliers, the skimming, the cream. In his own hand. He looked almost satisfied, and for a moment the case had the clean shape that powerful men prefer. A thief found. A thief named, a thief his to deal with. You were right to wait. Now I have it on paper. You have his paper, Nella said. She didn't say it sharply. She said it the way she'd say a sauce was a half-degree too hot, a correction offered before anyone got hurt. Luca looked up, read his ledger again. She set her finger on a column. Every line he wrote down is a thing he sold out the back door. Crates, whole deliveries, box of saffron gone, box of veal gone. Gross, clumsy, the kind of theft you can count by the missing crate. She moved her finger to the prep sheet map, to the cream. Now look at mine. The cream wasn't sold out the back door. The cream was delivered, in full, the right number of liters, billed as Valenti, and quietly switched for something a third the price. Nothing went missing. Everything arrived. The theft is in the substitution, not the disappearance. It's invisible unless you put it in your mouth. She let that sit. Rue steals like a man grabbing what he can carry. Whoever did the cream steals like someone who's never going to be in the room when the crate is counted, because they don't take the crate. They change what's in it and pocket the difference on the books. Those are two different minds. Rue is loud. Rue is a man who tapes his confession under a shelf because he can't help writing it down. She tapped the cream line one last time. The cream is silent. Rue didn't do the cream. He doesn't think that way. He couldn't keep it quiet if he tried. You found his whole ledger because he couldn't stop recording himself. The kitchen was very quiet. Then why, Luca said slowly, is his ledger here at all? Why would he leave it where you'd find it? That's the right question. Nella's voice didn't change, but something behind her eyes had gone cold and clear. He didn't leave it for me to find. Somebody made sure I would. Somebody who needed a thief I could catch. A loud, obvious, guilty thief, standing in front of the quiet one. You take Rue tonight, you parade him, you close the case feeling like justice got done. She straightened. And the cream keeps flowing. And the real money keeps going where it's been going. Rue isn't the answer, Signor Moretti. Rue is the gift. Someone wrapped him up and set him in your path so you'd stop looking exactly one step short of them. Luca stood. The stillness in him had changed temperature. No longer a man closing a case. A man who has just realized the case is closing him. Who has access to the supplier system, he said. Not the kitchen. The system. Who could switch a vendor across 3 months, clean, on the books, and never be in the room when anything was counted? Nella didn't answer. She didn't have to. They both already knew the shape of the person that described. Someone who handled the numbers, who stayed in the back where no one looked, who had been trusted so long that trusting her had stopped being a decision. It was the first time, in 3 days, that Nella looked something close to afraid. Not for herself. Signor Moretti, she said. What's on the menu for the dinner tomorrow night? And across the house, in the office where the books were kept, Gloria Sorrentino printed a delivery order for 1 case of cream, scheduled for the morning, billed to a dairy that had never made it, and slid it into the file with the rest, where it would sit, perfectly ordinary, until the moment it was meant to be found. The second dinner began at 8, and for the first hour it was the finest thing Nella Brandt had ever cooked. Both families sat at one long table now. Moretti and Bianchi, 30 years of blood set down like cutlery to either side of the cloth. The food was the language, and Nella spoke it flawlessly, course after course, each plate carrying the message the words couldn't. We have taken care. We have spared nothing. You are safe at this table. Don Raphael Bianchi, who had come prepared to be unimpressed, ate like a man slowly being talked out of an old grief. Luca watched the table soften. He glanced toward the kitchen once, found Nella at the pass, and the piece he'd waited years for began, dish by dish, to set. The soup course came at 9. It was her grandmother's soup, the one Luca had eaten standing up in the back of his own kitchen days before, the one she had decided, quietly and without telling anyone why, to put at the center of the most important meal of her life. It went out in 30 matched bowls, 1 to every seat, and Nella watched the first spoons lift around the table with the particular stillness of a woman who has put something true in front of people who don't yet know its worth. Don Bianchi's man tasted first, as Don Bianchi's man always did. He set his spoon down too fast. He leaned to the Don's ear. And Raphael Bianchi, who had been thawing all evening, went very cold, very fast, and pushed his bowl an inch away from himself. The oldest insult one family could offer another at a table. What, he said, into a room that had gone silent, is in the soup? It moved through the table like a crack through ice. The Bianchi side stopped eating as one. A woman 2 seats down made a small sound and pressed her napkin to her mouth. Someone said the word bitter. Someone else said a word that was worse, a word that turned a dinner into an accusation. Poisoned. And the truce that had taken 30 years and 1 perfect evening to build began, in the space of a breath, to come apart at the one table it could least afford to. Gloria Sorrentino was on her feet before anyone else, the very picture of horror, already managing it. "Get the records," she said, sharp, to the room, to Luca, performing alarm so cleanly that it landed as competence. "Every supplier, every delivery for this dinner. Now, before anyone says another word we can't take back." She turned, and her eyes found the kitchen, found Nella at the pass, and her voice when it came was full of a terrible, sorrowful reluctance. Luca. The soup was hers. She insisted on it. She wouldn't let anyone else touch it. A breath. "I begged her to let me check the deliveries this morning. She said the back of the kitchen was hers." And there it was. The trap, sprung clean, in front of 2 families and the man Nella had let herself begin to trust. The records came. Gloria spread them with shaking, capable hands, and there, of course there, was the morning delivery order. 1 case of cream, billed to Valenti Dairy, signed into the kitchen, marked received. Used in the soup. Nella's soup. Nella's insistence. Nella's name on the food, exactly as she'd demanded it the night before. Every thread Gloria had spent 3 days laying came tight at once, and they all pulled toward the woman in the stained apron at the pass. Don Bianchi rose. "You sat me down," he said to Luca, his voice shaking with old fury given new permission, "to poison me at your own table." Luca did not look at the records. He looked at Nella. And this was the blow, not the accusation, not the ruined truce, not even the danger now standing up around that table with 30 years of reasons to want blood. The blow was that for 1/2 of 1 second, Luca Moretti, the man who had handed her the books twice, looked at her to see if it was true. The trust she had built with her hands over 2 days wavered, just visibly, just long enough to break something in her chest she hadn't known she'd risked. The kitchen fear, the table fury, the doubt in the one face that had started to matter. All of it landed on her at once, and Nella Brandt went still. It was the stillness the whole kitchen had learned to respect. The stillness of a sauce in the half-second before it turns, of a woman putting a spoon to chaos and reading exactly what it needs. She did not protest. She did not weep or swear or reach for Luca's wavering face with both hands the way her whole body wanted to. Protesting was the unverified word in the back, and she had promised herself she would never win as that again. She thought about the delivery order. It claimed 1 case of cream, received that morning, used in the soup. But she had stood over that pot for 4 hours, and there was no cream in the soup. There never had been. It was her grandmother's clear broth. Bitter greens against a sweet base, not a drop of dairy from the first minute to the last. The record on that table described an ingredient that had never been in the dish, which meant someone had invented it. Someone who had never tasted the soup, who assumed a soup that good must be rich with cream, and who had written a delivery order that morning so the paper would be sitting there the instant the dinner went wrong. And it had gone wrong. But not from the pot. 30 bowls had come from 1 pot. If the bitterness had been in the soup, all 30 would carry it. They did not. It had been added after the bowls left her pass, to some and not others, in the serving corridor where the kitchen couldn't see and the table couldn't see. The one stretch of this house no one had thought to ask about tonight. And exactly 1 person had spent the whole evening steering every eye toward the records, the kitchen, the maid, and never once toward the corridor she had been standing in. Nella lifted her head. The terror had burned off her face and left the cold, clear thing behind it, the thing that came when a problem finally showed her its shape. "Signor Bianchi," she said, and her calm voice carried across the silent room without being raised at all. "Don't push the bowl away. Keep it exactly where it is. Yours and every other one." She stepped out from behind the pass, into the light, into the room where she had never once been allowed to stand. "Because I'm going to tell you which bowls are bitter and which are not before anyone checks, and then we're going to ask why I can." That's a parlor trick. Gloria said into the silence. Fast, because the silence was the most dangerous thing in the room. She's stalling. Luca, she had access to every bowl. Then it costs you nothing to let her finish, Luca said. He had not moved, but the half-second of doubt was gone from his face, burned off the same as it had burned off hers, and when he turned his eyes to Gloria, they held something she had not seen aimed at herself in 12 years. He let his glass rest on the cloth and did not pick it up again. Nella walked the length of the table. She didn't touch the bowls. She bent to each one for a moment, the way she bent over everything, reading what the room couldn't. Bitter, she said, at the Don's place. She moved. Clean, she moved. Bitter, 3 seats down. Clean! She marked them out down both sides. Bitter, clean, bitter, clean. Not a pattern of who sat where or which family or which end of the table, but a scatter, here and not there, that made no sense to anyone watching. Check them, she said, and stepped back. Taste them yourselves. I'll wait. They checked. Bianchi's man went bowl to bowl with a clean spoon, and at every place Nella had named bitter, his face confirmed it, and at every place she had named clean, he tasted soup and nothing else. By the 8th bowl, the fury at the table had turned into something quieter and far more useful to her, attention. Now you're wondering how, Nella said. Here's how. I didn't poison this soup. I cooked it. And the thing about a soup I cooked is that it carries something nobody can fake, because nobody else thinks the way I cook. She turned to Luca. 3 years ago, I started doing a thing the kitchen laughed at me for. Every batch of this soup, I balanced the bitterness of the greens against the sweetness of the base in a fixed ratio. My own, by taste, the same every time, down to a margin a machine couldn't hold. It's how I sign it. It's how I know, a year later, whether a pot is mine or someone copied it. The bowls I called clean are mine. They carry the signature. The balance sits exactly where I put it. The bowls I called bitter, she let it land, are mine too. Up to a point. Same soup, same signature underneath, and then something was added on top of it. After, past the place where my hands stopped touching it, she let the room do the arithmetic. The poison didn't come in the pot. If it had, every bowl would carry it, because every bowl came from one pot. It came after the bowls left my pass. Added to some and not others, by a hand working in the serving corridor, where the kitchen can't see and the table can't see, in the one stretch of this house nobody has asked a single question about tonight. She turned, finally, to Gloria. You kept everyone looking at the records. At the kitchen. At me. You never once let anyone look at the corridor. Why would you, when you were the only person standing in it? I was managing a crisis, Gloria said. Her voice was still steady. She was very good. That's my job. You're describing my job and calling it guilt. Maybe. Nella nodded, almost gently. Then let's not describe anything. Let's just ask one thing and let you answer it. She picked up the morning delivery order off the table. The case of cream, billed to Valenti, signed, received, the centerpiece of the whole trap. This says 1 case of Valenti cream came in this morning and went into the soup. You produced it. You spread it on this table yourself, as proof against me. She set it down where everyone could see. There's no Valenti cream in that soup, Signora Sorrentino. There's no cream in it at all. It's a clear broth. It never had cream in it. My grandmother never owned a cow. Anyone at this table can taste it and see. So I'd like you to tell the room, plainly, where you got a delivery record for an ingredient that was never in the dish. The silence changed quality. Gloria opened her mouth, and the steady voice, for the first time in 12 years, reached for a line and found the wrong one. The records don't lie, she said. The cream was logged, received. It was logged into the soup. I have thee. Logged by whom? Nella said. I never logged it. I bought my own Valenti 3 days ago, out of my pocket, because your cream was a fake and I won't cook with a fake. There's no record of your case in my kitchen because it never came into my kitchen. You wrote it into the file yourself this morning so it would be sitting there waiting when the soup went wrong. Wrong because you arranged for it to go wrong, in the corridor, with your own hand. You built a paper trail for an ingredient that doesn't exist, to frame a dish you'd never tasted. And you just told a room full of witnesses you know exactly what's logged in a kitchen you swore you never touched. She had asked one question. Gloria had answered it. And in answering it, in reaching, by reflex, to defend a record only its forger could have known the contents of, she had stepped into the only space the whole evening had left open for her. Luca rose. He did not raise a hand. He did not raise his voice. He simply looked at the woman he had trusted without thinking for 12 years and let the records she'd spread across his table stay exactly where they were, because they were, now, the clearest confession in the room. "The cream invoices," he said quietly. 3 months. The olive oil. The saffron. The veal. All of it through the supplier system. All of it through you. It was not a question. Rue was loud so you could be silent. You handed him to her so she'd stop 1 step short. And when she didn't stop, he looked at the bowls, the corridor, the forged delivery order. You decided to bury her under my own truce and let 2 families do the rest. Luca. The steadiness was gone now. Everything I did for this family, for the money this house bleeds because no one watches it the way I. You watched it, Luca said, all the way into your own pocket. He turned from her, which, from a man like him, was the loudest thing he could have done. And he did not give the order to anyone's hands. He gave it to the truth standing in the middle of his dining room, in a stained apron, in the light, where the back of the kitchen had finally been made to stand. "Tell them the rest," he said to Nella. "All of it. They're listening now." And the 2 families, 30 years of enemies, sat in their seats and listened to the woman they had nearly killed each other over explain, calmly and completely, exactly how the money had moved. While Gloria Sorrentino stood alone in the one part of the room no one was looking away from anymore. It was nearly 2 in the morning before the house was quiet again. The Bianchi family had not left as enemies. That was the strange grace of the night. Don Raphael, who had risen from the table ready to reopen a 30-year war, sat back down, let them bring him a clean bowl, and finished it to the last spoon. Once the poisoned ones had been drawn away and the truth of them laid bare, a man who had been brought to the edge of betrayal and then shown, in careful detail, exactly who had pushed him there, did not blame the hand that pulled him back. He left having eaten better than he had in years, and having watched the Moretti house police its own rot in front of him, which was its own kind of peace offering. The truce held. It held because of a soup. Gloria Sorrentino was gone, handled in whatever way men like Luca handled the people who stole from them and tried to start wars to cover it. Nella did not ask. It was not the part of the evening that belonged to her. Rue was gone too, dismissed before midnight, his television deal dead, his hidden ledger in Luca's possession. He had been the loud thief after all, and the loud thief's punishment was the smallest and the most fitting. The one thing he had wanted, the spotlight, taken away for good. No one would ever again photograph a plate under his name. That left the kitchen and the 2 people standing in it. Luca found her at the steel table, washing the last pot herself, because a pot left sitting was still a pot someone had to carry, and she had not yet decided she was the kind of person other people carried things for. "You can stop," he said. "There are people for that. I know." She kept washing. "I like the part where it's finished and clean. It's the most honest part of the night." He pulled out the stool at the end of the table, the same one he'd sat on 26 hours earlier, watching a maid work. And he sat, and for a while neither of them said anything, and it was the comfortable kind. "I'm going to offer you the kitchen," he said finally. "All of it. Head of the house, your name on the door, every supplier answering to you, every plate that leaves this place going out as yours. You've earned it twice over, and I'd be a fool to let you walk out that door tonight." He paused. "But I've watched you turn down 2 offers in 2 days, so I'm asking instead of telling. What do you want, Nella?" She set the pot in the rack. She dried her hands. Then she turned around and looked at him, and she took her time, because for the first time in 19 years, someone with the power to decide her life had asked her to decide it herself. "I want the kitchen," she said. "Not as a gift. I'll take it because I run it better than anyone alive, and we both know it. That's the only reason worth taking it for." She leaned back against the steel. "But the food goes out as the kitchen's, not as a face. No cameras hunting for someone pretty to put in front of it. When something good leaves this house, the people who actually cooked it get their names on it. The sows, the line, the dishwasher who hadn't eaten since noon. I spent 19 years being the hands nobody named. I'm not going to run a kitchen that does it to anyone else. Done, Luca said. What else? And I want you to stop looking at me the way you did at that table. It came out quieter than the rest, but she said it because she had decided tonight was the night she stopped leaving true things unsaid. For half a second, you wondered if I'd done it. I saw it. I understand why. You'd known her 12 years and me for one day. But I need you to know that it costs something. So if whatever this is between us is going to be anything, it's going to be between equals, or it's going to be nothing. I'm not a stray you took in because I made you soup. I'm the best thing that's happened to this house, and you're going to have to want me like a man who knows that, or not at all. Luca was quiet for a moment. Then he did something she had not seen him do all night. He smiled. Not the small, controlled thing he showed the table, but something younger, almost startled. The look of a man who has been handed back a piece of himself he thought he'd paid to lose. You asked me last night who taught you to make that soup, he said. You answered your grandmother and didn't ask why I wanted to know. He turned the empty bowl on the steel slowly in one hand. 30 years ago, before any of this, before the house and the money and the name, I was a boy nobody fed. There was a woman who ran a kitchen near the docks who used to leave a bowl on the back step for the kids no one was feeding. Clear broth. Bitter greens against a sweet base, balanced so exactly you remembered it your whole life. I have eaten in every great room in this country since, and I never tasted it again. He set the bowl down, until a maid in the back of my own house put it in front of me and called it nothing. Nella stood very still. I don't know if she was your grandmother, Luca said. I'll never be able to prove it, and it doesn't matter. I owe that recipe a debt I didn't know I was carrying, and last night it walked up to me holding a ladle. I didn't send 5 people home because you were good, Nella. I sent them home because I was hungry in a way I'd spent 30 years pretending I'd outgrown, and you were the only person in the building who'd ever fixed it. The kitchen was quiet. Out past the courtyard, the last of the cars had gone, and the great house that had nearly torn itself apart at a dinner table sat clean and still around the two of them. Equals, he said. Or nothing. You set the terms tonight. I'm agreeing to them. Then we agree, Nella said. She did not fall into his arms. She was not built for the rescue ending, and he had not offered one. She picked up the last clean bowl, the one he'd turned in his hands, and she set it where it belonged in the rack, and then, only then, the work finished, the kitchen hers, the night survived on her own competence and no one's permission. She let herself stand next to him in the quiet, 2 careful people who had stopped, for once, having to be careful. The recognition she'd waited 19 years for had come. The strange thing, the thing she would think about for a long time after, was that by the time it arrived, she no longer needed it. She had stood in the light and named the truth and won with her own hands in front of everyone who'd buried her. The kitchen already knew what she was. So did she. The bowl on the door would just be the part the world could see. Here's what I want to know from you tonight. First, when did you spot her? Gloria nearly got away with it. She handed everyone a louder, guiltier thief and a stack of perfect paper, and almost walked out clean. Was there a moment you knew it was her? A word? A record? The corridor no one was watching? Tell me where she lost you. And second, the one that matters more. Have you ever been the hands nobody named? The one who did the work while someone better lit took the plate? Who fixed the thing that was breaking, caught the mistake before it cost everyone, held the whole place together from the back, and watched the credit walk out the front door wearing someone else's face? I read every story you leave here, and I think there are more of you than this world has ever bothered to count. If Nella's night meant something to you, stay with this channel. This is the only place that puts the woman in the back of the kitchen at the head of the table, every single time. I'll see you at the next one.